What do you say to somebody that comes to you and you ask them what their passion is, and the answer is making money?
Mm. Find your passion and the money will follow. Because if you're just chasing money, then people are going to see right through that. Because students tell me that all the time. Because I ask them, "What are you passionate in that about?" And they're like, "Money." And I'm like, "Everybody is, right? In some capacity. Like you have to earn a certain amount to live, but you can make money in so many different ways." And if you're passionate about money, and if you're just chasing money, and if that's something that you value, you might be put in a situation where you compromise your integrity or where you compromise your morals or your values. So get really clear on how you show up in this world, and the money will follow.
With 50 plus years of combined produce, supply chain, entrepreneurial, and business experience, Craig Slade and Ed Bertad discuss the impacts of fresh produce on their lives and health. This podcast is a casual conversation between two friends just trying to get better. This is the Fresh Cred.
All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Ed. I know how you love for me to open it up with a good morning. I know you think that sounds kind of passe or pedestrian. I don't know. I don't know why you don't like good morning, but it's kind of a traditional deal, But anyway, I would like to say good morning to our special guest we have here with us, coming from the great city of College Station, Codie Wright. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here with you today on the one and only Fresh Cred podcast. It's exciting.
Amen. Edward, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Is it a good morning?
So,
Has it been a good morning for you? I like when
been
you
out.
ask me if it's a good morning when you're interested in really whether or not it's been a good morning for me. And then chaos ensues. But it has been a good morning. Thanks for asking.
Ed,
You
I'm
know,
so glad to hear that you've had a great, great morning.
so Codie, that's code for
Thank you, Cody.
when Ed starts like that. So when he's reaching for that attention, or he's reaching for some exploratory into his morning, that's a code for I have a story to tell you about my morning. I really wish you would ask me about it, and so I could tell you what went down today. So, Ed, what makes this morning so good today? Because I feel like you have a
Well,
story that we need to get into before we get into what our guest is here to talk about.
oh, stop. Stop.
So please tell
Please.
us.
Please stop. Okay, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
all
proud of
right, thank you.
myself. I just have to say,
That's
started
weird.
my minimum 100 push-up a day challenge March 1st. April 1st, I started 200 a day minimum challenge, and yesterday was 250. Now, I might have hurt myself a little bit or made a breakthrough. It's one or the other. But I'm feeling pretty good, and they're getting easier and easier. So I'm very curious to see if I keep this up, what by the end of the year I can accomplish, and if I can hit my 100 consecutive push-ups by the age of 50, which will be a little bit more than a year from now. So that's what's got me excited today. That and a
Excellent.
bunch of other stuff, but I won't
100
bore you with the
push-ups a
details. We can
day.
get into that later.
Yeah, so you're going to have to demonstrate these push-ups when we get to Viva. That's going to be part of the
Okay.
show.
No
I
problem.
want to
We'll
I have
see.
all
count
the
for you.
confidence in the world.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we will count for you. So, well, look, let me do a quick intro to our guest that's here with us today, Ms. Codie Wright. She is a professor at Texas A&M University. She is also a co-author of a book called Launchers. Ms. Wright is as she was a co-writer with Dr. Kerry Litzenberg there at
Mhm.
Texas A&M, and she is the assistant director of the Weston AgriFood sales program at Texas A&M University. And Ed, she is younger certainly than me and even you, and she's already accomplished book writing, professor. People actually want to listen to her, come to her class. So pretty well accomplished as a young person already. And so we're super glad to have you on here, Codie. Thank you very much for joining us. Really want to dig into and talk a little bit about your book and stuff. But, we always start this up. I give the intro as a couple of key things about you, what you've been doing, but we got to know. Tell us about Codie. Where you hail
Tell you
from,
about
what
me.
you're all about.
All right. Well, I am so excited to be here with you guys today. I grew up in a little bitty town out in West Texas. It's called Eden. It's by San Angelo. There's not a whole lot going on out there in Eden, Texas. And here's a fun fact for you: half of the population of that town is in the prison. So, pretty tiny town.
Wow.
And I know, isn't
That
that
is a
fun?
fun fact.
Pretty interesting, right? So I went to school there, elementary, junior high, high school, and I always knew that I wanted to go to Texas A&M.
Whoop.
So, right, gig 'em Aggies. If there are any Aggies listening, I love you, and if you're not an Aggie, I still love you too.
I'm representing Codie just for you. I brought
There
my
you go.
Aggie jersey out, everything.
I'm proud of you. I really am. So I went to A&M and I did my undergrad in leadership and development and then my master's in agribusiness. And as I was approaching graduation, I had several different job offers from companies, and the professor that I worked and wrote the book with, he approached me and he said, because I was working with him at the time, and he said, "Hey, why don't you stay here at A&M and help build a sales program?" And I was like, go into industry or stay in academia. And it was a really hard decision for a little while because, this was my first career. I didn't know what the best foot forward was, the best step forward. And so I really sat back about it and thought about it. And I realized that this was a very entrepreneurial opportunity. Entrepreneurship is something that is just in my blood and I love it. And so it would be something that I could grow and scale and measure. And so I decided to do that. And so whenever I hopped on board, we had only one sales class. And so the idea was to expand it into 4 different sales courses and an entire minor at Texas A&M in sales. And so if you are in sales right now, or if you're not in sales, you know that at the end of the day, you've got to sell yourself and sell your ideas, right? And so through this opportunity at Texas A&M, I've also had the opportunity to write a book and start a business. And also we recorded a podcast. And so I could talk about myself all day long. I feel like anybody could if they were asking them about who they were. But that's a little bit about me and what I do, and that's a little bit of Codie for you. How does that sound?
That sounds great. That sounds great.
Great.
And super excited to talk a little bit about the book and realistically how some of that ties into some things personally for me that's relevant. But I think an important story. You left out one of your potential influencers. So you had a ninja billionaire. I think that was a major kind of directionally put you on a path. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I worked at a hat shop in downtown Bryan, Texas. It's called Catalina Hatters. And whenever I wasn't in school, I was at work. I put myself through college. And so I loved being at the hat store. And one day, this adorable little boy, 4 years old, came into the hat store. And he was just a little firecracker. He had a great personality. He was so funny. And I helped him get his first cowboy hat. And so that was just a really fun process. And like all adults, I asked this little boy, "Hey, what do you want to be whenever you grow up?" And he sat there and he thought about it for a second and he looked at everybody. And with the most excited expression and voice, he said, "Codie, when I grow up, I'm going to be a ninja billionaire." And the whole store erupted in laughter because I thought, this kid is creative. This kid is so creative. But I thought, he probably most certainly is not going to be a ninja billionaire. And if any of you
Wait a second.
listeners
Whoa,
right
whoa,
now
whoa, whoa.
know
Wait a
one,
second. Wait just a minute. Because that is actually the career path I'm freaking on. And so you're telling me that's not in my cards?
I
Which
think it is
I
for you,
actually,
Craig.
which part? I'm actually thinking being the ninja might be more likely than the billionaire part, just the way things are going for me. So, but anyway, continue on. Sorry, I
And that's a
interrupted.
stretch.
Yeah, and that is yeah. Maybe
Well,
maybe I could just learn to throw those ninja stars. Maybe I could
I
be
threw one.
proficient at that. Did you throw one of those?
I did throw one of those, and the goal was to stick it into the wall that was about 12 feet away,
Mhm.
and it bounced off of the wall, and
Ooh,
so it did not stick in.
sounds dangerous.
It
Sorry,
was
I
dangerous.
interrupted you. Your ninja billionaire young man. He made you think, wow, he's probably not going to be that ninja billionaire, but
Hmm.
it gave you
But
some thoughts into other things.
certainly, it made me think about, why do we ask children what they want to be when they grow up, when they really have not had that opportunity to explore what it is that they are interested in doing, especially when from a very, very, very young age. And so you'll hear children say, "Oh, I want to be a doctor," or "I want to be a lawyer," or "I want to be a nurse or a teacher." Typically, these children will say that they are interested in a role that they are exposed to in some situation, be that with a family member or a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a cousin. And so it really got me thinking about how we need to be intentional with what we ask students or what we ask children about what they want to be or what they want to do or what they're interested in. Because I've also found that students who don't have that answer or children who don't have that answer can get really overwhelmed if they don't know. So, really
For
fun observations from a ninja billionaire story that happened in Catalina Hatters.
sure. Very cool. Well, I've got a couple of boys that just finished up college, and they're faced with that very much that similar dilemma. And in fact, another one of the young men that graduated out of A&M went to work for a friend of mine in Dallas in the produce business, but uh, all of them seem to be faced with that same problem, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my standard answer is, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do either. I just knew I needed to do something, so I got my degree, and then I was like, you know, I think I took my degree a little bit different approach than a lot of people. It's I didn't. I just was getting a degree because I was kind of told to get one, or not told, but I was encouraged that it was good for my future life. I wasn't convinced that, I mean, it was great advice. I gave the exact same advice to my son who just finished his degree only because we thought it was a good idea, not because he was setting on a mission. But I think, a lot of kids go in with, you know, I'm good at math or I'm good at, science or whatever without actually thinking what the end product's going to do for them for the rest of their life. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think the book's a great insight into that. Ed, I mean, from dragging cattle across the country to building pallets, you know, you've got a bit of a circuitous path to where you're at today. So just
Yeah,
curious, what was
I
your
had a
vision?
couple I had a couple questions actually, and admittedly, Cody, I did not have a chance to read your book. I did read
That's okay.
some of the reviews. I also listened to. I think you have a couple of the podcasts published at this point that you did with Dr. Litzenberg, which I must say, you had a great chemistry. Like you really, it was a very easy podcast to listen to. I thought it was great information. It piqued my interest as far as going through and listening to the rest of your podcast as well as reading the book. A couple of things that struck me interesting to me, and I wrote some notes while I was listening to it. And this will kind of be all over the board, but um,
Okay.
one was thinking to myself, in your book if there's any component that speaks to sort of shifting gears for those folks that are well down the path of their career and realize, you know what, I thought this was for me, but it's not. And I've got all this time and money invested in this path. And what do I do? And how do I switch gears to, for lack of a better term, happiness? And I know in one of the podcasts, y'all talked about happiness, EQ versus IQ,
Mm-hmm.
positive psychology. So there's kind of a lot of themes there. I don't want to get us too confused before we start actually digging into some of these. But I guess starting with, what do you say to a professional that's, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, and they realize that they thought they were in love with this idea of their career, and it's not. It's not what they thought it would be.
I would tell them first that they're not alone and that there are many people who shift their career 10, 15, even 20 years in. I was having a conversation the other day with a gentleman, and we were talking about this exact topic. And he talked about how our career can be in arcs. And every 10 years or 15 years, or what that looks like for you, you can change careers. And there's nothing wrong with that. It gives you a challenge, it gives you another opportunity to learn maybe about a brand new industry, and a whole new career opportunity is out there for you. So, to give you a little frame of reference, this gentleman that I was talking with, he was in marketing, he was a director of sales, he owned his own cruise ship company for a while. And so he was able to, at the end of his career, bring together a culmination of all of the things that he has learned and put it into a course where he now is coaching students or recent graduates or even people in business on how to make that transition and how to make that career shift. I think the idea of the corporate ladder is ingrained into society, and that you have to stay at one company or you have to stay in one career for the rest of your life. And you have unique talents ingrained inside of you. So, why not, if you are feeling that urge to leave or if you're feeling that desire to move on, use those talents in a way where you can be satisfied in a new career in another company or in another industry? Or maybe that even means going out and doing something on your own. So, for
Well,
the people who are out there that are thinking about maybe doing a transition, I would say you're not alone, and really do your research before you make that switch.
I don't pretend to have the answer to it, but I do know there's a concept that we've discussed significantly over several different episodes, and that's identity. So I think if anything keeps people from making those changes is work identity, right? I mean, you're talking to somebody that's been relatively in the
Mm-hmm.
same business for almost 30 years, Craig more than that. So, there is an old school mentality, to your point, in order to become an expert in your field or of maximum value, perhaps it is that long-term effect. So I think there's a lot of different drivers there for folks to feel, and some maybe perhaps antiquated concepts like climbing the corporate ladder. I mean, I think in a certain way, large companies, I've seen it firsthand, um, tend to utilize their best talent regardless of what, even interdepartmentally, right? A person that's
Mm-hmm.
perhaps a marketing genius goes to a role in operations or from sales to finance. And because I think in large part due to the fact that um, a high performer is a high performer regardless of where you put them, to a certain degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think large companies are doing in their own way some of what you're encouraging folks, or maybe not encouraging, but exposing folks to what's possible, which is, completely shifting gears and doing something functionally different, whether it's for one company or whether it's, across industries or products, etc. So that's pretty interesting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in your discussions about happiness levels, engagement. I think there was a stat in there about, and I don't quite understand. I mean, I know what Gallup is, but you had referenced some Gallup StrengthsFinder assessments. If you could talk a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about that, and then the engagement of today's workforce. I think it was like 38% that you had put out there, which seems very low to me, and engagement as it relates to job satisfaction and all that stuff. So I don't know if we're jumping around too much, or Craig, if you had something else to ask, but that seemed interesting to me. And
I'm completely confused right now, Cody. If you're confused as well, don't feel bad. So I mean, I'm not even sure
Sorry.
what the question was anymore. But no,
I followed you there, Ed.
Good.
All right, great.
You asked about Gallup StrengthsFinder, and that is an incredible platform and an assessment that helps you understand what are your top 5 strengths. And if you want to unlock all of your 34 strengths and get that report, I think the price is around $40. But it's worth knowing, how are you naturally wired? How are you driven? What are you naturally gifted at? Okay? And I use this in coaching organizations and companies and CEOs and higher level executives, but I also use it in the classroom too. Because if you don't know yourself, you can't lead yourself, right? There's so much importance and weight in self-awareness and self-management. So if I can look at my top 5 strengths and see, okay, this is how I am wired, this is how I am motivated, let's identify an area where I can use those strengths, I'm going to be more satisfied. But if you just kind of aimlessly wander around through life and have a general idea of what you're good at, you'll never fully tap into that deep level of self-awareness. And so that's what Gallup StrengthsFinder is really designed to do, is help you to understand, okay, these are my natural talents. How do I turn this into a strength? And a strength is consistently providing near perfect for performance. Okay. Now, I am not a magician and I cannot see into the future, but if I had to guess, I would say that Craig probably has woo or communication in his top 5. And whenever I say woo, it's not like woo, it's winning others over. All right. And so he is naturally drawn to situations to where there are going to be people, and he gets energy from people. Now, there are some strengths where they are more executing or more strategic thinking, and they don't garner that energy from people and being around other individuals. So, if you are operating in an environment where you are utilizing your strengths, you are more likely, 3 times more likely to, and you are 3 times more likely to say that you have an overall higher quality of life, because you're using what you were built to do. And it's like if you were going to be driving down the road and heading towards Dallas, Texas, and you know what that GPS is like to get there, right? Like you are using the GPS for your destination to Dallas. If someone was going from your location to Houston, you wouldn't be looking at their GPS, right? You would be looking at yours. And so people too often compare their strengths of themselves to the strengths of other people too. And the statistical chance of you and I having those same top 5 strengths is 1 in 220,000. So that should show you how hyper individualized that platform really is, and how unique it is to the person that is taking that assessment.
Wow, that's super interesting.
So yeah, I love the GPS analogy. I think that's perfect, right? I mean, just because uh, I've tried to tell or talk to my kids or whatever and say, look, you take a look at what the destination, determine your destination and then think through how you're going to get there. But then when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about somebody else's destination, how often we all get into the habit of looking at somebody else, a mentor, or just somebody that we feel like that their life might be good or whatever, and we're like, wow, maybe I should get on that GPS. But that
Mm-hmm.
analogy of, yeah, you probably don't want to get on somebody else's GPS. You probably need to have your own. And it makes me think. So I got lucky. So yes, I don't know. Maybe that people thing. I've heard that before. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's the energy of people. I don't know. I drink a lot of coffee. I got to be honest with you. So it could be a combination of caffeine and people. But um, anyway, I was fortunate. So I believe it or not, I mean, my original plan was to be a computer programmer, which is what
Really?
my oldest brother does. Sat
Hmm.
behind a desk. Now he is complete opposite in terms of people person kind of guy, right? You know, he's super smart. I'm not. He's not that big around, the whole. I mean, he likes people. He's a, but that's not where he gets his energy from. And of course, he sat behind a terminal for his career and wrote code. I hated writing code. I wrote code. So thank God I worked for a company in Dallas as an old Aggie. Played football for A&M in the 50s. Uh, he was one of the owners of the company, and he took me to lunch. And this is the guy's honest. So we're at lunch, and he's like talking to me. He's like, "Hey, what's your school? What you majoring in?" So, "Oh, I'm gonna be a computer science guy." I think this is, you got to remember, this would have been 80s, right? So the computer boom, it was on the horizon, but it really hadn't just blown up yet. It's like,
Hmm.
I think this computer thing is going to be big. So, that looks like a good place to be. Kind of looked across at me, and he goes, "Have you ever thought about being in sales?" And I was like, "Nah, I don't think that's really a good thing for me." It's like, I don't think there's really that much money to be made in the whole sales program. But honestly, in that moment, it was like clicked in my mind. I had never really thought about it, but long and short of it, that literally, that little, just him mentioning that and making me think about it. Um, and then I worked at an organization that had a bunch of salespeople, and they seemed to be having a really good time. And the more I looked at the salespeople and him thinking about that and how much I hated computers, it was just like, I'm gonna do that sales thing. That looks like a better path for me, and thank God I did. So, because I've had a great time. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been blessed because I enjoy what I do. I enjoy being in the produce business. I enjoy I've sold everything from produce to what Ed does, which is on the packaging side, and I've had the opportunity to meet a phenomenal amount of great people as well. So one of those things. It's I play by the rule of it's always better to be lucky than good, and that has been my strategy in life. And so I keep going down that path and until it doesn't work anymore. But anyway, a couple of things, Cody, on the book and for young people, right? Which is launchers, and we really haven't got into so launchers is really a book for primarily kids that are 20, just out of college to 35. I mean, that's ultimately what you guys were writing the book for. And
Hmm.
it is that ultimate question that everybody's faced with, whether you're coming out of college or if you didn't
Hmm.
go to college, but you finally get to the point in life where, okay, I got to grow up. I'm now responsible for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? So the book's really about trying to figure out that answer. And you know what? I know people that are my age that are still trying to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life, which is really, really, for me, that's like heartbreaking to think, right? Because um, the majority of your life spent doing your career. You sleep, you do your career, and
Hmm.
you know unless you, I mean, it just, anyway. So a little bit about, so the ninja billionaire, I know he kind of put you on the path. And just real quick, I mean, you had some friends, you had some motivation to get to this book, right? And then I'm curious about the
Hmm.
motivation to get there, and then I'd like to know maybe some successes, some things, some results that you've seen come out of writing the book, some personal stories you've got on along those lines.
Okay. Yeah. I always knew that I wanted to write a book. I didn't know that it would be in my early career as it laid out to be. But when Dr. Litz and I were sitting down and continuing to see all of the struggles that many students face, we were like, we have got to write a book about this. And I'll tell you, for anyone out there who is wishing to co-author a book with somebody, you have got to have a good, really good relationship with them, because there are times that you might present material that they don't like and vice versa. So do not let your ego get in the way, and remind yourself and remember who is your audience. Keep that reader top of mind. So when we wrote this book, it was a very, very fast process. it was really incredible because we wrote basically from sunup to sundown for 3 months in the summer of 2018. And we sent it off to the editor. We sent off our manuscript, and we got it back, made the edits, or we all edited it together. And then it went to, what are we going to put as the cover? And they were sending us arrows but it wasn't really something that just grabbed you. And so a friend and I were sitting down and we were thinking about, how are we going to make this cover really stick? And so we decided, it's called launchers. What do you do when you launch something? You push a big red button. So that's kind of how all of that came to be. But I remember an email that I received from someone that I had never met in my entire life. He said that he had stumbled across the book. Someone had given it to him and he had kind of tossed it aside, and he read it, and he told me that it totally changed his life. He was struggling at the time with some mental health issues, and there's a chapter in there, and don't tell any of the other chapters, but I'm pretty sure it's my favorite one, and it's all about moving from negative self-talk and doubt to confidence. And in this email, he told me about how he never realized how much negative self-talk and internal chatter that he had. And whenever he started to change that, he noticed really, really positive things happen in his life. Once you really start to change that internal mental chatter from negative to positive, you see the world in a different way. And so he explained that to me. He explained that he had found a position and he couldn't have done it without me.
Wow.
And I was just in shock, because how did he get my email, first of all? And also for him to take the time to send that message really spoke volumes of the impact that it had on him. So that was really, really incredible. Another student, or former student, came to see me, and he had all of these like notes shoved into it and highlights and dog ears, and he was like, this story really resonated with me and this is the reason why. And that was just something that I wasn't expecting again, but it
Call
was really, really
security.
powerful and impactful. Yeah. It was so cool. It was really, really fun. Other stories that I can think of people who have told me that they've been impacted by the book, or former students who have read the book, or colleagues that have picked it up. And what's always interesting to me is the different things that grabbed them, the different things that resonated with them versus somebody else. So that always makes me happy to hear what those are. And we put a lot of stories about other people in the book. And so if you are planning on writing a book, for any of you who are out there, I would encourage you to use not only your stories, but other people's stories, but also other people's stories too, because they are also a huge advocate for your book when your book launches and whenever you publish.
Excellent. Well,
That's
again, I
super.
think, yeah. Go ahead, Edward.
No, I was just gonna say it's so cool. I mean, I'm sure that feels great, right? I mean, the I would say few were trying to be humble here, but folks have reached out to Craig and I both, either thanking us for things that we either talked about or talked to them about individually, problems and just exploring issues that we've had ourselves, and it feels phenomenal. So I can imagine. I mean, what you've done is next level. I mean, you've immortalized your words, which it's as far as permanence is goes. I mean, it's forever. It's about as forever as we get, unless you carved it in stone. So that's got to be pretty amazing, right? To think about your work living on pretty much forever. That's pretty neat.
It
So
was
I was going
real
to ask you.
impactful.
Go ahead.
Somebody said to me after we launched, how does it feel to create something that will outlive you? And I never thought about it that way. So thank you. It is
That's
it
pretty
is
big.
really exciting. Really exciting.
That's pretty big. Yeah. Um, so the question I had, I wrote here in big bold letters as I was listening to your podcast and working a couple days ago. Um, so does success equal happiness, or does happiness equal success?
Happiness equals success. If we are always chasing that next thing, I will be happy when I get into that relationship, or I will be happy when I get that job, or I will be happy when my children turn 8 or whatever. If you are waiting for that happiness to come, you'll never find it. So you have to intentionally choose to be joyful where you are and content. And it's so, so easy to look at what everybody else is accomplishing on Instagram, on Facebook, and now LinkedIn. It's so easy to see what everybody else is doing and start that little comparison. And comparison is the thief of joy. So think about what you're happy for and what you're grateful for. And that also helps you be aware of the incredible blessings that you have on this earth and in this season of life. And I know that over the past couple of years, it has been difficult mentally for a lot of people. You get to choose if you are going to be happy or not. And you get to choose if you're going to be joyful. You really do. And it breaks my heart that so many people have gone through some sort of depression or mental health illness. And I have to tell you, like, as an educator in 2020, that was really, really rough. So we've all gone through something. We're all struggling with something. Give everyone a break and be kind to each other and choose happiness, because happiness won't find you. You have to find it.
So when you were talking about the comparison dynamic, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure somebody studied it, but particularly now as it relates to social media and just so much visibility of what folks are like flaunting their hyper success.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say there has to be at least a small percentage of people that truly use that as motivation and are able to kind of propel themselves forward? I would expect that it would be a much smaller percentage than those that have
Mm-hmm.
negative feelings about the comparison.
I think that's a great, great point, Ed. It depends on the person, right? But there are definitely people out there who are using that as motivation. They see that that's the next thing that they want to accomplish or have in their life. And so I think it depends on the person and how they are using that specific social media, or I guess in this case, career media platform. Are they using it to compare themselves, or are they using it as an inspiration, as something that they are striving towards in a healthy way? It's all about healthy balance in this whole situation.
So, Cody, I mentioned, and I don't know if you want to reference your age, but I know we've got a birthday tomorrow. But
Yes,
I got to tell
I
you,
have a birthday. I have a birthday tomorrow.
you got a lot of wisdom for a young person. Yeah,
Thank you.
you contain. In fact, I've got 56 years into this journey, and I think you sound like you've surpassed me already. You'll be 29 tomorrow, correct?
That's right. I'll be 29
Uh,
tomorrow.
well, happy birthday for sure, and it is. I
Thank
mean,
you.
certainly, but I say that about your age, not just because it's impressive, but I think it's telling for other young people as well, right?
Hmm.
In other words, you don't have to wait till you're 56 or later to try and figure everything out, right? I mean,
Right.
one, and I think that's probably even more impactful for the book that you're writing. You've written that book from a space that is similar to the people or to your audience, right? You're in that
Hmm.
area, and so you can speak with a very closeness and understanding of what's going on. You see it around you. You've seen it happen. So your understanding's got to be much better than the average Joe, anyway. So, the show and what we talk about on here, Ed and I being in the produce business, that's kind of our base. But the whole concept behind this is a conversation with each other or with people like yourself, and um, how to get better, and how to look and improve things. And what you're
Mhm.
talking about is so spot on to what we're trying to communicate out there, right? Ideally, there's a young person that will tune into this. I'm going to be sending this to my kids for sure. And in fact, I'm already decided I'm going to buy a couple of books and send those out. Uh, but yeah, I mean, you talk about finding that path, right? And not pressuring yourself when you don't know what you want to do. I mean, you really, it's not that hard to believe, considering I think you described it in the book as when you've had the snowplow parents, you know,
Mhm.
taking all the barriers out of you. It's not that hard to believe, since you haven't really been challenged at anything, that you don't really know where you drive your passion from.
Mhm.
When you start to dig apart how, particularly in this day and age, I mean, I would have liked to thought we weren't helicopter parents, but we were, or as you described them, snowplow parents. And it does make it tough when finally the snowplow's not there. You're like, whoa, what do I do now? So, I mean, yet, some of that. I mean, I think that as you talk about it, um, it's a great message for kids to listen to and understand. And I think, I mean, if I'm, let me know if I'm wrong, but I mean, your message kind of is like, you know, don't don't let the fact that you don't know and all the pressure from the outside coming at you, don't let that force you somewhere. Just
Mhm.
take a minute to relax, recognize it is what it is, and deal with it. Is that pretty much kind of what the guidance that you're giving folks when they're at that crossroad?
Absolutely. 100%. You don't have to know all of the answers, but you have to put in the drive and the determination and the research to get there. And I'll give you an example. I had a young woman who was sitting in my office, and I said, "Hey, what are you interested in? What do you see where do you see yourself going after you graduate?" And she sat there and she thought and she said, my parents are in the oil and gas industry, so maybe I'll do that." And I said, "Okay, your parents are in that industry, but are you passionate about that?" And she said, "No, not really." And I said, "What are you interested in?" And she said, whenever I was little, or whenever I was about to graduate from high school, I thought about being a pediatrician because I really loved the idea of working with children and helping them, especially whenever they were sick. But I couldn't do the biology or the chemistry that was required. And I said, "Okay, do you think there are any roles where you could still do this?" And she sat back and she said, "I don't really think so." And we talked about some different opportunities where she could still be aligned with children in this capacity. And she left and she got a role where she is in a sales pharmaceutical role with pediatricians, where she sells the pediatricians and she still helps children in the capacity that she wanted to. And so, parents, if you're trying to think about how to approach this conversation with your kids, of helping them identify what that next step is, help them think about what are they passionate about. Now, I asked this one student one time, this one young woman, I said, "What are you passionate about?" And she said, "Well, I watch a lot of Netflix." And she said, "I like to walk my dog and I like to drink wine with my friends." And I said, "Now, I don't know if you can find a role where you are dog walking and drinking wine with your friends and watching a bunch of Netflix, but if you do, let me know, because that sounds like fun.
That sounds amazing.
It sounds like she needs to work on finding her passion first and then
Yes.
finding the role to connect to the passion.
Yeah, absolutely. So think big. Think really, really big whenever it comes to figuring out what it is that you're passionate about, because I truly believe that there is a reason why all of us are here. And you are built with a purpose. You just have to figure out why were you put on this earth and the strengths that you have to use them in a way to help the other people around you.
And
There's
Craig,
a really cool saying. Go ahead.
no, finish. I'm sorry.
Okay, there's a really cool saying that is, in order to be interesting, you have to be interested, right? And I think that also goes to say, if you want to be people to see you as someone that's really, really interesting or really, really cool, you've got to be curious about the environment that you are in to figure out what it is that makes you unique.
Amen.
I like that.
Amen.
Yeah. And Craig, you're talking about, Codie's accomplishments. I mean, I think it's a great case for finding your passion. I mean, it's obviously, you were talking about her accomplishments relative to her career and the length of it. I mean, it's a pretty good case for um, finding your passion and how it can be an accelerant to success. Like how much easier work is, I guess, and how much, it's something that I feel like I'm just starting to figure out. And a lot of it has to do with, physical health, mental health, all that stuff kind of has to be firing on all cylinders, which is, the ultimate goal. I wish I would have even thought about it 20 years ago. But it is what it is. And we're working on it now, I guess, is the best I can say.
So if we can grab a couple of kids with this podcast, we can like a couple of young people, right? And they find their path, right? That'll be, there's something there. Maybe there's a couple other kids that by the time they're 29 that are listening to this podcast will have written a book that are changing lives. Think about the domino effect of all this.
You guys are doing incredible things with this podcast.
Well, wait a second. I want to touch base though on my career path. Okay, just real quick.
Okay.
So,
Craig's,
are you familiar?
yours is almost over. Come on.
Are you familiar with Steve Aoki?
Me?
Yes.
I have to say that I am not.
Oh, come on, Codie.
Who is he?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
He's
I
like
know.
the
Is
greatest mixologist. Well, not mixologist. Mason, what are they? He's not a DJ. Do you call him just DJs? I thought they had like a fancy name for him this day. So Codie, please go look up Steve. There's a documentary on it, which is an amazing documentary. But I'm going to be the old version of Steve Aoki at some point.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm going to look him up.
Yeah, you need to look him up. But anyway, a couple. I want to get into a couple of things. We're kind of running on time, and
Wait,
we've hit on a lot.
Can I
of
just ask one more question along the same lines?
One more
that we're
question,
talking
Ed,
about?
and then that's it.
Okay.
You hit your limit.
What do you say to somebody that comes to you and you ask them what their passion is, and the answer is making money?
Find your passion and the money will follow. Because if you're
Amen.
just chasing money, then people are going to see you right through that. Because students tell me that all the time. Because I ask them, what are you passionate about? And they're like, money. And I'm like, everybody is, right? In some capacity. Like, you have to earn a certain amount to live. But you can make money in so many different ways. And if you're passionate about money, and if you're just chasing money, and if that's something that you value, you might be put in a situation where you compromise your integrity, or where you compromise your morals or your values. So get really clear on how you show up in this world, and the money will follow. And whenever I was like 21 years old and someone would have said that to me, I'd have been like, go kick rocks, right? Like, of course I'm passionate about money. Don't tell me to go be passionate and then the money will follow. But I know some people and many people who have just taken a job to get a $20,000 raise and they're miserable. So figure out what you like. Because if Craig would have been put in a room with nobody behind a computer all day long, he would be miserable.
But think
And then
about how.
that,
But think about that. I could have worked for Microsoft or
yeah, you
Apple.
could
I could have been a
No.
Google guy. Can you imagine? I would have been a
You
miserable
you'd be
billionaire. I'd have been.
you'd be sitting around in a room with computer parts strewn all over the place. That's what would have happened. You would have tried to just tear it apart and see if you could put it back together.
This is probably true. Yeah, that whole computer thing never would have. And I will say, you mentioned sales, that person that wasn't good at science, whatever. I will tell you, all young people out there, that there's no better default switch than sales. Now, granted,
Mhm.
everybody's not wired for it, but a lot more people are wired for it than you think.
Mhm.
And it's not as bad as they bill it out to be. Yeah, you don't get a cool doctor in front of your name, and you don't have people, swanning all over you because you've spent 45 years in college, but it is a great place to go, right? In just about
Mhm.
any field, right? I mean, if you love, no matter what you love, if you love watching Netflix, walking dogs, and drinking wine, there is probably a winery that you could go to work for
Mhm.
and be offered up to walk people's dogs when they come to the winery to take the tour. I mean, you could come up with
Mhm.
any, as a salesperson, you can do
I
whatever.
agree.
So,
Yeah, and there's so much freedom in sales too.
yeah.
So much freedom.
So, I want to get to a couple of, just a few things. One, parents, right?
Mhm.
So I know in the book you talk about some crazy stories, parents calling up, kids get jobs and then the parents call and complain they didn't get enough money or didn't enough vacation time. But I would like to know, what would be the number one recommendation? So it's going to be first for parents. So that's
Okay.
question one. What's the number one recommendation you give parents with kids?
You are not their best friend.
Damn.
I know, and that probably like ice picked a lot of people right now.
That
But
did me.
take something into consideration.
Okay.
Your your brains are not developed for females until you're about 26 and males until you're about 25. I'm sorry, 28. Females 26, males 28. And so you as a parent still have that guiding and nurturing and loving role that you had whenever they were in junior high, high school, elementary school, etc. Okay? If they anticipate you to have a negative reaction about the way that they're going to launch their career, then they will more than likely respond in the way that you want them to. And while you know your child so well, you may not be truly aware of the deep, incredible strengths that they have that in an environment that they would work really well in. So that's the first piece of advice that I would give to parents. Be their friend if you want, like be friendly to them, but just keep in mind that um, children of that age, they still need parents too. And the next piece of advice I would give to parents is to not impose what your brother or your sister or some of your friends have done who have been really successful onto your children. And we kind of call those Aunt Susie standards, right? So Aunt Susie went to school and she became an accountant. She's got the nice house and the nice car and the nice spouse. That doesn't mean that your child would succeed in that area. So really think about getting them some sort of coaching or some sort of strengths type of work, or encourage them to even take some of those assessments on their own and review them, because that will help them with that self-awareness. And then if you have friends who or family members as a parent of roles that your child is interested in, make that connection or suggest that they grab coffee or even, have them do a ride along, but let them feel it out on their own as well.
Gotcha.
And I know that probably is hard for a lot of parents to hear. And I don't mean to be ugly or be mean in any way
See, I'm not real
at all.
controlling. My
Mm-hmm.
daughter's part of this podcast, and she can confirm that. I don't think she's here. Mason's my son-in-law, and so, but I'm not very controlling, so it's pretty easy for me. I'm kind of a hands-off parent, so there's no pressure on my side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being facetious.
Oh, and here's another thing. I'm sure you guys could agree with this. We've all made mistakes in our career. We have made mistakes that we learned from, right? And so I have seen a lot of students recently really be afraid of failure. And I tell them, you got to get used to that F word, and not the 4-letter word that just ran through your mind. I'm talking about the F word of failure, because you're going to fail in some capacity. And I think what academia does, unfortunately, is it shows students, and it shows people who are going through the educational system, that there is one right answer. And so when a young person who's recently graduated, is faced with a situation where there's not one right answer, it can be really overwhelming. And if you make a mistake, own that mistake. Don't try and hide it from your boss. And, accept that your children are going to fail. And so just have conversations with them about what were some areas in your life that maybe you learned from, or a failure that you had, because they look up to you so much and they don't expect you to have gone through experiences where you did fail. And I think as we enter into our 20s and into adulthood, we start to see our parents in a different light, and give them a little bit more grace for the way that they may have parented, or the way that they may have shown up in our lives. And just know that your child is going to need to get used to the fact that they're going to make mistakes. So that's some advice that I would give to parents.
Awesome. And the kids, so obviously, number one, read your book. But after they read your book, what's the number 2 thing that you would say would be important? Is it the Gallup survey? Is it, what would you say is number 2, just from a process standpoint?
Really become aware of your emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And that level of self-awareness and self-management. So that is done through the way of Gallup StrengthsFinder. Would 100% recommend anybody who hasn't taken this assessment to go and do it, because it just sheds so much more light on who you are as a person, and helps you be able to explain the things that you have seen show up in your life. DISC assessment is really great as well, not only from the perspective of understanding who you are, but also understanding other people, because we have to shift the way that we communicate with other people, not as, any form of manipulation, but so that you can have an effective conversation with that person if you want to show up well in that relationship and in your life. So those are the things that I would focus on. Become aware and write down, make a list of what your triggers are. So what are your pet peeves, and what are your what really frustrates you? Because if you are aware of what they are, then you can manage yourself better if you are in a situation where that is present. And people do not make you mad. You allow yourself to be mad at what someone else did or said. So whenever you place the blame on somebody else, that is removing you from the situation of anything that you said or did that was out of character of who you are. So become aware of your self-awareness and your self-management. Get good with relationship awareness and relationship management, and become a student of yourself. So that would be the next step, is diving into that emotional intelligence, into that self-awareness. And then the next step is, okay, now that I know who I am and how I would operate and within this area, who do I know, or who do I know that knows somebody that is in a position that I could see myself in based on what I know about myself? Reach out to them, contact them via LinkedIn, through other people's networks, and get people to connect you with them via email, and learn from them. Become a learner about that person's current role or their career. So yeah, learn, meet a bunch of people, learn from them, and then execute appropriately by through that identification of a role that you are in. Now, if they are 20 years older than you and they are in a career position that is not something that you can step right into, then have them help you identify what was that career path. It's always going to look different between each unique individual. And then identify a company and a role that you are interested in, and don't just apply. You need to apply with gusto. Show that company that you really want to work for them. Those are the steps that I would suggest for somebody to take.
Excellent. Excellent. Eddie, any more? I know you got at least another question, so I
I've
didn't
got a
want
ton of
to. I
questions.
know you do, but I have to rein you in a little bit. So
Codie,
one more question.
I'm thinking about entrepreneurs, right? So a lot of the same rules, obviously, that you're talking about, or guidance that you're talking about, applies to entrepreneurs, but obviously they're not focused on working for a particular company, but maybe launching a product or a brand or a company themselves. I mean, I guess just out of curiosity, what would you say the percentage of folks that you work with or students that you work with are really focused on like kind of a standalone path where they're doing everything themselves, by themselves, for themselves? And then what percentage are actually thinking about kind of the corporate trajectory?
Mm-hmm. I would say about 15% of the students that I'm working with have the desire to go into entrepreneurship, because there is an entrepreneurship program in the department that I am in, and we share a lot of those same students. And for the advice that I would have for any of you entrepreneurs out there, first, I appreciate your drive, your determination, your love for meritocracy, and the idea that you can create an environment that you want to be in. But if you are that solopreneur, it can kind of get lonely at times. And so put yourself in an organization or surround yourself with people to where you can go to for advice or that you can bounce ideas off of. And if you're looking to launch a new product, or if you're looking to strategically pivot your business, I would encourage you to really think through that situation and also attack it with the gusto that you had, the same gusto that you had of starting that business, if it is the best decision for you and for your company moving forward. So don't just think about the next year and how great it could be. Think about the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And ultimately, what is the goal with you in operating this company? Is it to keep it and to grow it, or is it to start it, scale it, sell it, which is a really cool model to do? So just get really clear with what your intentions are. Did that answer your question?
That's great advice. Yeah, that's a great answer and great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Codie, we're gonna getting close to needing to wrap up, because we do want to be respectful of your time, but at the same time, I want to, we talked a lot about the book and certainly some outstanding advice, but I don't want to leave without talking about your recent journey with your co-author, Dr. Litzenberg. I know that he's recently passed, and he was your mentor. Obviously, your co-author had a lot to do with your career path that you're on. But I mean, just if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of insight into you and Dr. Litzenberg, and just like I say, real briefly, your journey as it's been the last couple of months.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. I never thought that I would have a best friend that was like almost 50 years older than I am. And it was a great relationship. I was so thankful for the mentorship that I had from Dr. Litzenberg. He got really sick in the fall of 2021, and his health steadily declined until he passed on March 17th. And I have to tell you that for a little while, I didn't really know how to feel because in my entire working career, this mentor has been there with me, and he was a close friend too. So the grieving process is real. And so for any of those of you out there who have recently lost a dear friend or a loved one or a colleague, I would encourage you to, number one, be aware of like what your mental health is, and number two, in order for you need to grieve and let those feelings come naturally. I had the chance to tell him goodbye, and I got to tell you, if you don't ever have this opportunity in your life, I haven't had it yet. I hope that you get the chance to tell somebody goodbye, because it reminds you to live, and to live intentionally. Dr. Litz had these cordials at his house, which are like little bitty wine glasses that you drink poured out of. And whenever he would have a party at his house, you would go and pick out a cordial, and you would explain why. He would make you explain why. And then he would have port tasting parties. And so
Nice.
before I went to the hospital to tell him goodbye, I stopped by his house and I grabbed a cordial and I grabbed some Zacapaz rum, because we taught an MBA sales class down in Guatemala together, and it was some really good rum. So I got to the hospital and I poured us a glass,
Oh my God.
and we toasted to life and to the book and to the podcast and to the program and all of the really cool things that we were able to build together as that friendship. And so I took a sip, and he was like, I want some. I'm like, you are on hospice. If you drink this, you are surely going to die. Like, I'm actually going to kill you. And he was like, no, I'm going to die anyway. He's like super joking about it. He's like, let me have some. And I was like, okay. So I poured him some. He had some. And gosh, it was just a intentional moment
Right.
of saying goodbye to somebody. And it was lovely, even though we were like literally laughing about the fact that he was about to die. It was such a holy moment. And he said, now, Codie, you have to promise me, since I'm actually on my deathbed, that you're going to write another book, and you're going to talk about me in it. And I was like, yeah, of course. Absolutely. So, I'm starting to work on book number 2 from an actual like a book like launchers. And so yeah, that was such a cool moment of getting to say bye to my friend. And it's weird because I can't call him now. Like, he's not there for me to just pick up the phone and say, hey man, what's up? So
Yeah.
it's been a very great reminder to live and be kind and just help the people around you. So
No, that's
it's been good.
beautiful, and yeah, certainly. Sorry for the loss for sure, but I mean, I think when of all the stuff and everything you talked about, the book that you guys wrote together, one thing for me it resonates with me because I try and live this way, but I think that live intentionally, that should just be like everybody's motto, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you should think about that every day as, you know, I mean, literally as simple stuff as drinking coffee in the morning, right? I mean, there is an intentional way to drink that coffee and then live in that moment. And so I think that's huge. Thank you for sharing the story with us, and certainly, uh, for the doctor, his book's going to live on, his words are going to live on
Hmm.
forever and change lives forever, which is, as we talked about already, is pretty impactful. Hey, and before we go, I got something I want to show you, and you know what? I'm going to get your address. I'm going to send you. So, have you read this book?
Thank you. It is Standing Ready. I have not read it.
So, my brother sent it to me for my birthday. So, I just recently had a birthday, and I told you a fanatic Aggie. My brother graduated from there. I graduated from North Texas out of Denton,
Hmm.
but I'm a fanatic Aggie, and so yeah, this is on the 12th man. I mean, of course, know somewhat the story, but this actually goes back to A&M when it was the first couple of chapters about the very beginning of A&M. AMC, is the original name, and it goes back to prior to football, and it talks about football. it's a super short book, which is perfect for me because I love short books. But yeah, so I'll see. I'll get your address. I'll get you a copy of this because it's been. If you
Thank
haven't
you.
read it, I mean, if you've read it, then obviously, but love for you. I think you'll enjoy it. So
I love reading. I love reading books, so I'm super excited about that. Do you want me to share with you really quickly what I'm reading right now?
you bet, please. We
Okay.
usually do what you eating, but we'll do what you reading because that's what I'm
What
reading. What you
what am
reading?
I reading? There's a book called Easier by my friend. His name is Chris Westfall. He wrote a book and it's a really cool parable about how to make your life easier. You can't make everything easy, but you can make things easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm reading. I'm also reading Chuck Yeager's autobiography. He's the first guy to break the sound barrier, and he's just got some super awesome stories about his time in the Air Force.
Yeah,
And I also just started a book called Cues by Vanessa Van Edwards, which is a body language book.
very nice.
And the
All right.
Bible. I
That's
read that every day.
Do
that's
you
that's
really?
four, Craig.
So
Just in case you weren't counting, that's
yeah.
four. Are you? Do you have a rotation of 4 books going on right now? I might have a rotation of
So
4 magazines that I'm reading right now, but um, that's that's
you
four.
say you say that funny, but I will tell you. Of course, I don't know the names of any other ones. I'm reading Ready Player Go. I think it's what it's called. It's a book that came out. Ready Player One. Ready Player One.
Okay.
And that is got to do with the whole um, metaverse space. It's a book that was written some time ago, but it's very emblematic of metaverse. And then the other one that I'm reading, which and this is a health book. I can't remember the name of it.
I'm
Anyway,
going to write these down.
oh no, that's your
Ready
book.
Player
Don't just
One.
take a job. I'm looking at that's your book. Nature wants us to be fat. So Ready Player One and Nature wants us to be fat,
I
and
can't wait to
then
read those.
Standing Ready. So, Ed, but the real question is not to ask me how many different books I'm reading. What you want to ask me is, like a month from now, which one of those have you finished? I'm guessing I will have finished this one because look at the size of that. The other ones, I will probably still
Yeah.
be reading 6 months from now. So, but and it's interesting. You mentioned reading the Bible, so I'm not as disciplined on daily reading, but I'm setting out at least a day a week. But I'm reading. I'm trying to read cover to cover.
That's incredible.
Well, it will be when I get done. Again, I may be 70 by the time I get to it, but you know what? It's in the path, and
Well, you'll have retirement to work on that.
I got
Uh,
retirement exactly.
yeah.
So,
Hey,
but
Craig, I thought about you this morning watching the news early. There
at
was an
least you didn't
interview of
dream
an
about me this
author.
time. Remember
No,
that
this
last
time I
time
did
when you
not dream
dreamed
about
about me?
you. Or at least I
Dreaming
thought I
about
was
you
awake.
last time.
I wasn't into my full cup of coffee, but there's a book called The Metaverse by Matthew Ball, and I thought you'd be interested in it. So I haven't read it, but saw it promoted today.
Absolutely. I did. So what you sent me last night, the Howard Stern interview with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that's like top of my list
Yeah,
to go and
I
look up.
figured.
So,
It was actually a pretty good
so
interview too.
Anthony Kiedis minus the heroin is the other person that I have on my wish list that I want to be, right? Either Steve Aoki or Anthony Kiedis, who's the lead for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, if you don't know Anthony Kiedis. So anyway,
Hey, I
Ed,
had one more question for
one more
Cody.
question, and then we
All
got to
right.
let
So
her
she's
go.
talking
She
about all
has
the
a
books she's
full. She's
reading.
got real jobs, unlike you and I. She's got a real job. She's got kids waiting out the door right now, banging. Hey, teach! I need to get in. I need to launch my career, and you're talking to these two knuckleheads.
So since
So
you've written the book, and you read books, let's say excluding the Bible, um, do you read books differently? I mean, are you reading as more from a different kind of point of view? Are you thinking about um, certain techniques you'd want to employ in your own writing, or you just for pure enjoyment, or for self improvement, or does it vary? Like, how do you process when you read now? Is it different, and is it different than when before you wrote the book?
I love that question. I've never been asked that question before, but it's something that I think about often. And I would tell you, I totally read books differently now. From the perspective of an author, I always like to think about what were they thinking about here? Why did they use this story in this specific chapter? And what characteristics did they glean from that story? So, yes, 100%. I absolutely think about how it's different. And it's more of a intentional read now versus before the book was written. And so for some reason, I think I'm able to remember it better if I read it and if I listen to it. That's just the way that my brain works. And so I'll read it and I'll get it on the audiobook version and listen to it all the way through as well.
That's
So
cool.
to answer your question, yes, 100%. It's
Yeah.
totally different now.
It's interesting how everybody's brain works a little bit different. I was recently with some friends. We were camping and we were around the campfire, and they'll make fun of me if any of them hear this, but kind of out of nowhere, and this is something I'd been thinking about for a long time, is just I don't know, just something I thought was peculiar in the way that I thought about it. And there's other things we won't even bore the audience with. But this thing in particular my question was, when you think about the calendar year, is it circular or linear? And as you travel through the year, as we physically travel throughout the year, is the calendar year as you perceive it fixed, or is it moving along with you? So it sounds kind of like a weird question, but I'll tell you the answer for myself is I visualize the year in months as circular, horizontal, and it is fixed. And in my mind, I'm traveling throughout that calendar until it reaches the beginning again in January, right? And so some of the answers from friends were, no, I think of the calendar as linear. And when I'm thinking about traveling throughout the year as we go day by day, I'm moving down that trajectory of a linear calendar, and then I come back to the beginning and restart. So just those concepts they're just so polarizing that I thought, wow, what else could there be out there, right? On how people think about just mundane things like that.
So
I love
Ed,
that.
I think I might have talked to this. One of the best books I ever read. It's called The Fourth Turning, which is a lot of people have read it now, but I read it back in the early 2000s. It's written in the late 90s. If you've never read The Fourth Turning, it would probably be number 2 on my list. Dr. Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning of Life, is absolutely number 1. If you've never, I know me and you've talked about that, Ed, but Codie, as we were talking about books, that Man's Search for Meaning of Life, that's a must read for
I'm
everybody.
going to write that one down too.
Oh, believe me, you read that one. That's
Or
probably
you
the
could
one
just
book
listen to the podcast.
Yeah, you could do that. So,
Give
yeah,
us a like
but
while you're
Fourth
at it, would
Turning
you?
is a good one. The Fourth Turning gets right into that question that you have about the world and life being circular or linear, and it makes a really good case that it is circular. So, anyway,
I like that.
yeah, you're on. Hey, you know what? And I want to tell you, gold star for the best question of the day.
Who are you talking to?
Well,
Hopefully
you had
me.
the best question. Yeah. Well, who else was I talking to?
Man.
Yeah, you got gold star, baby.
That and 50 cents might get me a bottle of water, but
I know.
thank you anyway.
You'll be telling that later today. Hey, I got gold star, best. You'll go. Yeah, you will.
Check this out.
Y'all are fun.
We're not that much fun, seriously, Codie.
I think of the calendar as like a linear, like with January being up here and December being down here, and then all of a sudden you just like jump back up to January, and it's
All right,
a
that's not
white
logical.
calendar. Whenever I think about it,
That's not.
it's in my
That's
mind.
not logical. But how about, like, how illogical is it for me as for example, when I talk about it being fixed, means as I travel away from December, as we travel through the days and months from December, I'm traveling away from that fixed point and then returning to it. So it's not only circular,
you imagine
but
it.
it's fixed. and you're
imagine it
traveling
like
throughout it
I
until you come
like
back.
that. That is so fascinating. I'm gonna
No.
send you guys both a code to Gallup StrengthsFinder, and I want to know what your strengths are, and we should
Oh
talk
boy.
about it.
Hey, have you ever had anybody get none?
No, I have not.
Good. There's not like a
Yeah.
board that gets posted as to who got the most strengths and least strengths or anything like that. So none of it's public. So like if you just get a couple
No.
of strengths, like all right,
Everyone gets 5.
you just automatically get 5 strengths.
Yeah. Well, you
They
get
just they give you some even if
shown.
you don't deserve a strength. You get a
Yeah.
couple. Well, this guy, give him a couple of those.
I'm breathing. I'm
Yeah.
awake.
You're awake, bro.
I'm eating.
You've got that breathing thing down like a madman. That's good.
That
I
is
guess
so
it is
funny.
that.
Should be an oxygen tester.
Wim Hof breathing method. That one's really nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Codie, we may have to have you back on. Looks like you've got
Okay.
much more to share with us, but like I say, I know you've got to go get those young Aggies and bring them in and set them on such the good path. Send them all to
Any promo
produce
for
and
Codie
sales.
before we hit our own promo? Codie, you want
Well,
to promote?
yeah, Codie, tell us about where people can find you. I know your book can be purchased on Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
but if there's other places, yeah, please tell us how they find you, how they can connect with you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can send me an email. I can put my email in the show notes if you would
Excellent.
like for me to. And then, yeah, check out the book on Amazon. We have launched a podcast. It's called The Launchers Podcast. This is a body of work that was completed in 2021. And so it's me and the big guy himself on the podcast, and we share information, content back and forth. It's a dialogue like Ed and Craig. And so that's where you can find me.
The launchers. And then what is your if you want to put it out, your email, or do you have a website or anything like that?
Yes, there is you can go to codiewright.com. That's CODIE WRIGHT. And my email is cody.wright@gmail.com. So that's where you can find me. And there's also a launchers website as well. So that's how you can get in contact with me.
Outstanding. And Ed, how can they find us, my friend? How can they comment and share some love with us?
Well, Craig, as you may or may not know, we don't have a book, but folks can get a hold of us nonetheless.
Yeah,
and maybe it's in our
Cody.
future. I sense a nugget of inspiration on your behalf, and I might be getting a call later on. If not today, another day.
I may have actually already started the book, so just saying.
Oh, without me? Okay. Well, like I said, we don't have anything yet. Let's put it that way. But nonetheless, you can get a hold of us at The Fresh Cred. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as Cred Fresh on Twitter. Please share this podcast with somebody that you think might enjoy it, or that it might be of some help. I think we had a great time with Codie today, and we thank her again for being with us. Send us your requests or feedback at thefreshcred at gmail.com, and I think that's about it.
Thank you, Codie. Thank you, Ed. And you know what? I didn't mention this early on, but thank you, Trent Bishop, for introducing me and Ed to Codie Wright. We appreciate it for sure. Mason, thanks for your hard work. Guys, everybody go out, have a blessed, outstanding day, live intentionally, and make it a good day. We'll see you guys. Take care.